Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Ooh, did you feel the
How
power?
about that? Oh, geez. And if you would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dennehy?
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez? Absent. Councilmember Jaquez? Absent. Councilmember Meisner?
Here.
Councilmember Reed? Absent. Councilmember B. Smith?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Here.
Mayor Smith?
Here.
Thank you. This evening, we're having another scintillating discussion on stormwater rates. And with that, I think I will turn it over to our city administrator.
Yeah, and this evening we'll be having a presentation from Tammy Nordyke, our finance director, and Adam Lancaster, our city engineer.
Great, thank you.
You ready?
Never, but we're going to tolerate it.
Okay, so with our storm water rates, we wanted to give a basic history of where we've been and where we're looking at possibly going. In 2017, the rate study was completed, and it recommended that we have the revenue increases of 9% each year for 5 years. In 2018, we did an increase of 0.001821 per square footage IMP. In 2019, that rate was the 0.00054. And basically that increase, I have it on. Oh, thank you. And that increase was only to cover the debt service that we incurred. So we did not do any increase that would have followed the rate study. So options that we are looking at is to do a cost of service increase, which is basically 5%. That proposed rate would increase our annual revenue, or our annual revenue would go to 1.7 million. Our budgeted revenue in 19 was 1.6 million. So with the potential revenue increase for a full year of slightly over $81,000. The average monthly increase for residential is about 68 cents. For commercial, it's $3.51. What that does is that covers the increasing operational costs and some capital costs. Option B goes with the rate study. So this is the 9% increase. With this, we could see a full year potential revenue increase of slightly over $149,000. The residential increase would be $1.23 a month, commercial $6.32 a month. This would not allow us to, this does not include the new staff or the lease purchase. It just says, okay, we're following the rate study. This is what we need to have happen. Option C says, let's add 2 new FTEs and the new vac truck, which the potential revenue would be $262,000. The increase for a residential customer would be $2.17 a month, commercial $11.19 a month. Our option D includes a combination of our rate study and the adding of the 2 new FTEs and the vac truck. That potential revenue increase is $408,000. Residential monthly bill would go up approximately $3.40, and commercial $17.51. This slide here basically shows a comparison of all of the options that we briefly went over. The annual increase for a residential customer under option A is the $8.18. Option B is $14.72. Option C, $26.07. Option D, $40.79. On commercial accounts, option A would be $42.13 a year. Option B, $75.84. Option C, $134.32. And option D, $210.17. That is what I have for our presentation this evening. So now we can turn it over for questions, discussion.
So, Mayor Smith?
I do want to put a little bit of a background information for our newer council members. The topic of stormwater is a subject that it's been a really dominant problem in Canyon City for decade upon decade upon decade. And we were to the point where we had more than one party that had, more than one party threatening to sue Canyon City. One party literally had the lawsuit in their hands, ready to put in to give to us at any minute. And so that's why we started to look at stormwater more closely. We took out the bonds so we could address some of the most major needs. And that has kind of settled them down a little bit. In the past, we used to call them angry gorillas or something like that. I don't know if you remember that conversation.
I did not condone that, or I did not participate in any of those
in any of
discussions.
that. But it was pretty serious, but they're still there, they're still watching, and they're still anxious to know that we are taking this seriously and going to address the problems of stormwater, in particular to our city water draining into their ditches and MS4 permitting and Clean Water Acts. And that's why we are finally, hopefully, taking the leadership to address this. This is one of the key fundamentals of government. And so it's hard to raise the rates, but I think we do need to address it. As far as the vac truck, that conversation came up on 12th Street when the street was getting redone on 12th Street right by the middle school. They had leased or did a test on a vacuum truck that it goes down and it sucks out all the junk that's in the stormwater pipes. And that hasn't been done in Canyon City. For how long has it been, Adam, since that type of what would be normal maintenance work been done?
Well, we do that on a regular basis. However, the truck that we currently have is well used when we purchased it. It tends to be broken down every time that we really need it. And then, it's kind of hit or miss as far as how it operates. And then there's the issue of having the available personnel to run it. And so we know that, so it's our regular public works crews that run that truck. And so the issues with that is when we need the truck, is it available? Usually not, because it's in the shop. And then also there's no regular maintenance. It's more of a reactionary type maintenance
Right.
Than it is a regular maintenance where that truck is, could be and should be running, daily, weekly, where it's not doing that now.
So, yeah, and so when I spoke with Department Head Jim Johnson, it has been a really considerably long time since there's had a regular maintenance done. And the staffing is so sparse in the streets department that they are just totally busy taking care of needs of potholes and the basics and curbs and all of that. And so when they went to go, they did a test run on a vac truck for 12th Street, and it was pretty much 90% clogged with not just dirt and leaves, but like 2x4s and shoes and all kinds of stuff. And the assumption is most of our pipes throughout Canyon City are probably in a similar condition. And as we are investing some of this bond money to have new stormwater put in, just new pipes put in, they'll be in the exact same condition as well very quickly. And so this is just the vac truck and the employees to be able to operate it. They said it would take 2 employees every day for an entire year to address the pipes in Canyon City alone. That's kind of what we're looking at, just some normal basic maintenance that has been neglected. But I do have a question, because I thought we had approved some money to try and repair the vac truck. that we have. Have we done that, or
We-
are we asking if we can?
We are doing an emergency repair on it. We have culverts in the Dawson Ranch area, for example, that have been waiting close to 5 months now to be cleaned. And because we've had that machine continue to break down, and then there's special parts that had to be ordered for it, then we had to do emergency purchase, and so, yeah, that's exactly where we're at right now with the existing. So we're still Band-Aiding it together, and it's limping along for now, but that's where it's at.
And probably part two of that problem is that the vacuum, the reach doesn't even go. So they go, if there's a block, they go from this side of the block towards the middle and from this side of the block towards the middle. But it doesn't actually reach the middle. And so
Right.
it's still plugged no matter
Right.
what. So that's my little 2 cents on that background information.
Councilmember Denny? Are
I don't
you
think it's lights
requesting,
on.
or is that you?
I think it's me.
Oh,
So, I thought we approved this 2 FETs and the FTEs in the budget.
No, not for stormwater.
Those were parks only?
Those were parks for the forestry department.
And that's because funds can only come out of stormwater rates. And so we can't,
Theoretically.
well, yes.
There's conflicting information over the last years in terms of whether that is or is not legal.
I think it's legal to a percentage, according to Tabor.
so I'd like to jump in here a little bit too, because especially for our new council members, there's different drivers that we have that are, although we say stormwater and we use one word, we're talking about several different things. And because of that, it can get confusing at times. The city was issued a permit under EPA stormwater regulations that requires the city to have, to take certain stormwater activities. We have a permit, we have to comply with the permit. That requires us to do certain outreach, different things. So the compliance part of stormwater is driven by that EPA permit. And that's essentially the operational budget of our stormwater department, where the city actually is authorized to issue permits to people who are constructing or disturbing earth, so that they employ the proper methods to prevent sediment loading in the rivers. So we have that part of it. That's EPA driven, and then we have the stormwater part, which is just runoff, just the water that runs when it rains. It can run everywhere, and living in the city, we've all seen that down towards City Market. You know how bad that gets down there, and that's a result of not planning for stormwater runoff in the past here in the city. And so what that means is, and of course, the stormwater doesn't just start magically at the edge of the city boundary. We're downhill from a lot of county property, and so there's stormwater run on to our jurisdictional area that we have to deal with in our system some way. Sometimes stormwater is set up so that you have essentially a regional authority where you draw boundaries for this stormwater authority on a map, and then that authority can become a taxing entity and apply taxes to control stormwater runoff in that area. One of the things, going back a little bit to the permitting, one of the things that our permit does not have in it at this time is requirements for quality purposes. Right now, our permit is basically best management practices. In other words, engineering standards. If you're going to disturb the earth, you have to use this type of straw log to prevent sediment transport and things like that. But our permit doesn't contain quality provisions. And the quality provisions that the EPA implements are called Total Maximum Daily Load, TMDL. And that gets real onerous real quick, because then you have a numeric standards in your permit. Right now, we don't. It's basically a narrative permit. We don't have numeric standards. But if you have numeric standards imposed on you, then you lose all the power of self-regulation. Essentially, the EPA sets the rules on how you're going to be dealing with stormwater and what that means. And the example of that is Colorado Springs, where they've had to, impose a huge tax on their citizens because they kick the can too far down the road. Really is what happened. And so we've got the EPA driver. We have the driver for stormwater control for our citizens and for some of our business entities, the ditch companies here in town. And so we've got it's kind of a double-edged or double-sided problem that we're dealing with here. And these rate increases that we're talking about kind of mix, talk about it as one thing. And so we don't have it really split out that way. Earlier, Mr. Meisner was talking about the idea that if you have a stormwater authority, the funds are supposed to come from be generated by the taxing ability of that authority, and you're not supposed to be using general revenue city funds to fund that authority. And so that's really the kind of that I think outlines the horns of the dilemma that we're on, which is a tough problem, a tough nut to crack. We cannot ignore it. We've got to, and the previous council borrowed money for capital improvements in the stormwater quantity side of things. And so that's one of the things that we're dealing with here. And that was to really demonstrate that we do take this problem seriously. We intend to address it. And we've got to make the hard choices to make that work. Mayor Smith?
I just wanted to, I forgot to add something in my last comments too, is a concern that I have is that we also have the inflation. And so we know we have to at least bare minimum keep up with inflation. And when we did get the $8 million for stormwater projects, we had an entire committee of citizens that really worked hard to make sure that every single penny was budgeted to its maximum potential to actually get tangible and real results to alleviate stormwater flooding. And so we went and got a bid out based on the estimates given by your engineering company that did design work, and there's probably more to the story than that. We put the bid out, and it came back $1 million over our budget. And so we still haven't even been able to do that first project because we can't afford to go $1 million over. And so we're having to tweak that. But that's just another factor we need to consider in our considerations of this, is the cost of inflation and that even just the driving costs, because there's so much demand. It's hard to get people to come to Canyon City to do our projects. And so it costs a little bit more, or sometimes $1 million more to get that attention.
Mr. Hammer? I may also add, just a note as you're considering this, because I know we're looking long-term as well. We know that this current model is not sustainable. And so that's why we did have the committee look at different options and consider a special district. And I believe that's still the direction the city is moving. However, that can take some time for that to happen. And so I see this as how we're going to get along the next year or so is or years. But depending on how long it takes to come up with a different solution. But we know this is not the end all.
And yours is the one that works. Yes, Councilman Meisner.
Well, just to reiterate for council, one of the problems with the district, increasing the size of the district, is ultimately the county has to sign off on that. And thus far, they have not been willing to do that.
Okay.
To minimize the politics, the county believes that any district that would exist would have to be voter-approved in terms of rates and increases. And so they have not been willing to approve any type of stormwater, to jump on board with any kind of a stormwater district that would be fee-based. So consequently, you'd be talking about a tax-based stormwater district, and we already know the challenges associated with getting a tax-based stormwater district approved. Because once we construct or design the concept of the stormwater district, it then goes to county for some kind of approval for the county, and then it goes to approval to the voters. And then the voters approve that, and then they have to come back and approve, if it's tax-based, they have to approve the appropriate tax that would go with that. Year and a half, 2 years ago, I essentially gave up on that process of saying it's not going to work. You're not going to convince the county to go along with a fee-based district, and like it or not, we have stormwater issues within the city limits that have to be addressed, and I would then continue to, I'm going to say push, or approve with some moderation, increase in rates to try to take care of that, knowing that the big problem takes more monies than what we can generate through the city limits. If it were legal, I would suggest that we would start building our own little wall on the north side of Canyon and run all that stormwater out into the county and let the county residents deal with it. I hate to be like that, but that's the reality is that when you look at North Canyon, that water, a good portion of that water is coming from a county area that flows into the city and then flows through my garage. So I'm one of those citizens that understands the reality of what it means when we get 1.5 inches of stormwater, but I don't personally see a long-term solution unless somebody comes by that can convince everybody that we need to move to a larger stormwater district. That's the ultimate solution, but I don't see how you get that through our current county commissioners.
Right.
I respect their opinions in terms of them believing that any rates have to be resident approved, but some services that we have in the county or city or wherever it is, have to be just relative to the service that you're providing, and there needs to be a fee for that.
And just to add on to that before I recognize Councilwoman Gonzalez, it's a little bit like saying there's never any crime on my street. Why do I have to pay for the police?
Right.
It's a little bit of that attitude, and I don't blame them. This is a hard problem, but it really is one that we all have. Right now we're doing our best to try and address it. Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Well, I wanted to follow up with what Jim had to say. While I disagree with you, I don't think it's a lost cause. I think that with the county, I think that we need to continue conversations as we continue to have a stronger relationship between city and county. I think that if we let it go, it's going to die out. But if we keep bringing it up, we're putting pressure. We need their support. And as they can see that we're willing to work with them, they're willing to work with us, it might just happen. So, I always say I live on a hill. It doesn't affect me, but it does affect me. It affects my neighbors, it affects my friends, it affects my families, it affects our business. So it does affect, and so I think it's unfair to say that we are gonna, it's a lost cause. I think that we should continue conversations and continue to bring it up and continue to bring it up. That's all I gotta say.
I get a rebuttal, don't I?
Oh, sure.
I don't disagree. But It's a real challenge to convince. I mean, they're fundamentally saying, so long as you take the approach that it's not going to be, if it's going to be a fee-based revenue generator, they are not going to support it. And I haven't seen any leeway from any of the commissioners that they would even be willing to consider. Now, we do have a new commissioner coming on, and that commissioner may have a different viewpoint. But again, with the existing commissioners, which, and again, I respect their opinions, but their opinion is pretty steadfast, that it has to be a taxed, voter-approved based revenue-generating organization. And if it's not that, they are not going to support it. And I haven't seen any wavering from their standpoint. And my point is, the citizens of Canyon City need to stand up and say enough is enough. The numbers are there to get this approved. In terms of, if you look at the number of residents that live within the city versus the number of residents that live on the outlying area of Canyon City, it's obvious that if the city residents wanted to have this done, they could sway the vote. But the obstacle is not the citizens. The obstacle at this particular point is the opinions of the county commissioners in terms of trying to generate that, that stormwater district.
Mayor Smith.
I have two things. One for Dolly. You talked about, you don't get it on your hill, but your neighbors do, your business does. I also want to point out that two hot spots that have significant impending flooding potential is City Market and Walmart, and that will affect absolutely every single person in Fremont County to have those at risk of flooding, and those are real risks for both of those that need to be addressed. And as far as the county's determination for requiring a tax approval, maybe we might have to make a compromise. I don't know. We need to continue those conversations.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but for the most part, the 8 million or whatever we're spending is going to address the drainage issues at the highway in the City Market area. It is not going to address any of the flow issues that come into City Market. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
So we need to keep that in mind, that we're talking about that area there, City Market, in terms of getting some drainage there across the highway, and that water's still coming down north or from the north. And we do not have the money to address that issue.
And I think that what our figure is 70 million, is that right, Adam, for the total stormwater controls, the quantity controls that are needed?
Yeah, I think we made some adjustments, inflationary adjustments, so I think we're at 125 now.
125 million.
For the priority capital improvement list.
Right.
Yep.
Priority capital improvements.
Can you at least clarify for the new guys what the 8 million is going to do? Just real brief.
Sure. So the 8 million is essentially four projects, I'm sorry. We are doing some culvert enlargement improvements in the Dawson Ranch area. We are doing a stormwater replacement on North 9th Street in conjunction with a water line project and a 2A street reconstruction. And then we are making some improvements to what we call the WPA channel, which is the channel that drains down through the City Market area and south to the river. We're looking at making some improvements between the highway and the river. And then then the final project we're looking at is on Rhodes Avenue from the highway south to the river. There's a channel there that needs a fair amount of improvements.
And to add on to that, I'd just like to point out that we have a study that identifies, it was basically a stormwater runoff study that identified the areas, the flows, and the needed improvements to cover those. I'm not sure that you've seen that, but that's something that if you haven't seen it, the new members of council, you probably should take a look at it, because that's really the basis. That's what we're using as our basis document to talk about the flow issues for stormwater. Councilmember Meisner.
Thank you. The one thing I would suggest to new council is that you get with Adam or with Ryan and get a copy of that latest Adkins study that shows our different drainages so that you can be a little more educated in terms of the specifics that the northern end of the town, if you want to call it that, is basically divided into different drainage areas, which are natural flow accumulations, or however technically you would say that, but you need to be aware of that and keep that document, because that, like John said, that's the beginning point of all of our discussions in terms of how do we do what. The other critical element and decision that was made with the stormwater group that got together is we had the agreement that while it would be nice to go up on North 9th Street and fix my problem, it doesn't do absolutely anything for the people downstream. So the fundamental decision was that we're going to start at the river, which is where all the water ends up, and work backwards from there, and that's the real solution. The problem is some of those things, some people up on North 9th, North Orchard, and that are not going to see absolutely any difference in their problems. And they're still paying stormwater.
Quick question though, but if we clean out their pipes, would that give them a little bit more alleviation of flooding?
Better maintenance will for sure make a difference, yes.
So that is a possibility that could help everybody in
Yes,
Canyon City.
yes.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
When I first was on council, Adam and I don't know if Glenda went with us or not, on that tour around
Yeah.
town. Adam and Glenda took a day. John, you were there. And it was super helpful in my understanding of where the water goes, where it flows, where it gets stuck, how all this works. So if you have, if you can make the time to do it and Adam has the time to do it,
Yep.
I would suggest to go out and take a couple of hours with him and just tour what's happening out there, because it really puts it into perspective. It's hard to look at a map and go, oh yeah, I get it, until you're out there and you look at it. So
Yep,
I
absolutely.
appreciate what you did for us that day.
Good idea.
Yeah.
And part of the reason we're having this meeting, this is a general government meeting. This is where we get to discuss, have back and forths, and talk about this. We're not taking a vote tonight on what rate is appropriate. We will do that in a formal council meeting. But this is intended as kind of educational for everybody, to give everyone on council a chance to ask questions and make sure they understand, that we understand what we are talking about and what we intend to do here. Councilmember Meisner?
Well, historically, I think the intention of this discussion at this level is for this group to come to, while it is not an official capacity decision, it is the responsibility of this group to provide a recommendation to staff so that staff can prepare the appropriate ordinances that they would then bring back to council for an official declaration of whatever we're going to do. And with that, my preference of eating any of these raw apples is item C.
Councilmember Denny.
I agree with Jim on, it is a tough one to swallow, especially being new coming in. But, I have had the advantage of working with some of a ditch company, and I understand a lot of the water issues already. We had to work with the city on our ditch right there, on our flume coming out of Lincoln Park Pump Ditch, right there on the bottom of Pump Hill. So I'm very familiar with what we had to do with the city there, and it is a tough pill to swallow, but I think if we can get as the saying goes, get ahead of the 8 ball. I agree with Jim.
I do have a question. Right now, the options that we have in front of us, what is our budget, our 2020 budget based on?
So the 2020 budget is based on no increases, but even if we were to approve this, we would have that go into effect, and I think the recommendation would be to actually purchase the vac truck and hire the staffing either towards the end of this year with the budget amendment or budget for 2021, because the time it's going to take to actually purchase a vac truck and have it delivered, it's going to be towards the end of the year anyway.
And so talk to us, Ryan, if you would, a little bit about the timing. So if we're going to, at some point, vote on a rate, the appropriate rate, and would you tell us a little bit about the timing of that, please?
Yeah, so it's an ordinance, so it's going to have to come back for 2 readings. I don't know, would we have the ordinance ready for the next meeting?
We already have them ready.
You have it ready to go? So we could bring it back as soon as the meeting on the 21st. So it would be approved, at that first meeting in February. And then I believe we have to put public notice out after it's approved before we can actually start charging folks. So there's that process, and then the rate will go into effect probably, I would say, after the first quarter.
After the first quarter.
Yep.
And so we would allow those funds to accumulate to help us purchase the vac truck.
Correct.
The ordinance is rather lengthy from a standpoint, if I recall, that it's got all those tables in it, similar to the water rate increase that shows all the different rates for.
No, it's pretty simple for us because it's just the base rate.
It's
for
just those 2
impervious
base
surface.
rates,
Yeah,
okay.
it's like a 2-page ordinance, yeah.
We actually had it prepared when we did the water rate discussion, so
Right.
it's just about ready to go.
I mean, for new council's benefit, the one issue of controversy, which I don't know that I understand or necessarily agree with this, but we have a commercial rate and an industrial rate, and I'm not sure I completely understand the difference between that, or the justification, but
Not for stormwater. Stormwater, it's one rate. Everyone pays the same rate.
Residential.
Right, so the reason you see the reason we're showing you commercial and residential is commercials typically have a lot more impervious surface. And there's been that discussion before of
Okay.
how much commercial pays versus residential. So that's why we show the difference, but the rate's exactly the
rates
same.
is, okay, good.
Everybody pays the same per square foot. Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor Smith?
Just to offer my 2 cents, we talked about this being a really tough pill to swallow. It is very serious, but we also need to be really responsible to our citizens. And overall, I feel like option C is an option that benefits everybody in Canyon City, no matter where they live. And being responsible also means making these tough financial decisions. And a 0.000589 increase is still a small drop in the bucket or in the ditch compared to $125 million of priority projects.
Councilmember Meisner, I'm going to call on you, and then I'm going to ask our audience if they have anything that they would like to add in this discussion. But go ahead, please.
Just to reiterate on Mayor Smith's comment, that we're talking about, depending on, your income and your fixed incomes, to some people that's a pretty insignificant amount. To some people, that's a very significant amount. To a very small business, excuse me, it's a very significant amount. To a large business, it's insignificant. The other factor that comes into this is, we talk about, I'm going to digress slightly, we talk about the monies needed to build a rec center. And one of my positions with the rec center is I'm more than, I'll do anything I can relative to the rec center, but we need to recognize some other fundamental issues that have to be paid for in terms of infrastructure that are coming out of the residents' pockets. And when you look at stormwater and you look at basic freshwater rates, those are 2 things that have to happen. And I just don't understand how you're going to pay for a rec center when you've got these other 2 monsters under the bed that are needing that money. So just keep that in mind.
So we are a little bit informal here tonight. If there's anyone that would that'd like to address us on this issue, I'd sure like to hear your thoughts.
Hi, everyone. Tim McCain here in Canyon City. I guess my question is how often is the impervious surface calculated, or how often is that? Is it done by GPS? I'm sure it's satellite or because there's a lot of concrete being poured in Canyon City, and I'm just curious, how often that's everybody's paying their fair share?
Sure, good question. So the initial impervious surface was collected by satellite, and then we went from there and did a QC on the satellite images, because obviously they're not perfect. Then we always give everybody the opportunity, at any point in time, they can make an inquiry if they think their impervious surface is wrong. A fun fact about that is most of the time when people question us and we go out and actually do an on-the-ground survey, we end up with more impervious surface. But then the updates are done only by observance of our staff if we see something happening or we have a building permit. Those are the only ways we know it. So, because we don't have permits for flat work, for example, so if someone were to pour concrete in their backyard, we wouldn't know about it unless we were there for some other reason and noticed it. So there is a fair amount that could fall through the cracks. It's a pretty robust process that we have, pretty transparent as well. We've talked in the past about doing another flyover, but we just did not see, because our rates are so low compared to some of the cost of business, it didn't make sense to do a new flyover on a regular basis just because of the expense. There just would not be the payoff on the little pieces of concrete that we might collect. So that's how we do it. So anytime there's a building permit, like I said, or even if someone does an addition or something like that, we go out and collect that, and we do that by an on-ground survey.
And
So
so if you have,
anyone having any flat work done doesn't pull a permit. So if they want to go from a gravel driveway to a concrete driveway, they could do it on a weekend. You wouldn't know about it for a long, long time.
Right, unless we drove by and noticed it. Yes, that's right. And so our inspectors and Glenda, as they go through and do their inspection, that sort of stuff, they know the neighborhoods pretty well, and so they actually do catch a lot. I won't say, what percentage they catch, but they do catch a fair amount. We do monthly updates to the system, and, you could look through that if you wanted to see, kind of a history of, there's some months that we have reductions because we have demolitions and those sorts of things. But in the scheme of things, yeah, somebody might be getting away with not paying 30 cents a year, but I think for the most part, it's a pretty good process.
That's it.
thank you.
Is that public record?
Sure, yes.
To resurvey somebody's property,
Mhm.
does it cost anything?
Oh, no, nope. They just have to make a request. Yep.
But if we wanted to do it citywide, that would be a cost.
Oh, if we want to do a comprehensive citywide, it'd be very expensive, yeah.
It'd be very expensive. We're talking about, $50,000-$100,000 or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. We wouldn't, it wouldn't be worth it to cover the revenue that we could potentially collect.
Right.
Is that impervious surface reference public record?
I believe to the respect that utility billing is public record. There's some nuances there for utility billing, like your water bill. I can't find out what your specific water bill is, but I can find out what the total collection amount is for the city. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but that impervious surface reference is only on a private water bill, right?
Right. And same with stormwater. It's
So
on the
that would
same-
be somewhat protected information.
Correct. You could find out what yours is. In
Right.
fact, it's on your bill, but yeah, you couldn't ask what your neighbor's is. No.
So if I filed a complaint, what would you guys do?
If you thought someone had a lot of impervious surface that was new, you would just let us know and we'd go out and investigate.
Just like any other ordinance?
Yep, the law allows us to do that, so,
Right.
yep, we would go out and check it.
Okay.
First thing we'd do is we'd pull up our current image in impervious surface and see what it is, and then do a drive-by, and if something looks different, we would go and knock on their door and say, we need to do a survey, and we'd do that.
Makes sense.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
So, I missed the first part of the presentation, and I left my, my information on my desk at work. So I'm wondering, can you do just a short recap of what these increases, 2 minutes at the most?
Page 1.
Sorry, guys.
You were just going Option A is essentially a 5% increase.
Yeah.
Option B is 9% increase, which follows the rate study.
Can you go back to page 1?
Yeah, that's what I need, is to see the slides.
Okay,
Yeah,
hold on.
so the 5%, while she's doing that, the 5% was arbitrary. We just picked a number, a lower number to be considered, completely arbitrary. The 9% comes from the recommendation by the consultant on the rate study. And then.
You're right. So this
next
is
one, yeah.
where we are right now, where in 18, we did have, I think, that was, I think, the first year we actually did the 9%.
Right.
And then, or in 18, and then in 19, we only increased our rates for the debt service.
Okay.
And then we have all of this, them on different slides. So this, option A was just 5% to help cover cost of service increases, so kind of a
So this would
CPI. and-
potentially increase revenue by $81,000.
Correct.
Yes.
But wouldn't cover it wouldn't cover.
And so. and
Infrastructure.
Page through then, for option B,
Plus the truck,
That's all it would cover?
would not cover that.
Would not.
Yeah, this is completely arbitrary, no work or anything attached to the 5%.
right?
Okay.
And then the 9% comes from the rate study. So that's what the consultant told us our actual cost of operation is at this point in time.
And so that's about 149,000 a year
Does
increase
not
in revenue.
include new staff and lease.
And still
Okay.
doesn't get us to even.
Okay.
And then C covers the pump truck and the 2
Just-
staff.
Right.
262.
No increase to operations, just the expansion of service.
Sure.
And then D is basically a combination of B and C. That gets you the increased operational revenue and the expansion of service.
Okay, so then go back to the very last slide that we were at. Okay, that's what I wanted to see, what the percentage was compared to. Okay. That helps me decide where I sit. Okay, thank you.
And then for new council, or maybe anybody, just keep in mind that the recommendation was 9% per year.
Right.
So in any year where you don't do the 9%, the 9% for this year is irrelevant for the most part because we've already lost ground. We're not keeping up with the study as it stands because we chose in previous years not to do the 9%. So we need to be careful with that when we think about, oh, we're doing 9%, we're keeping up with the study. We're not, because we lost 4% each year. Or one year we did the 9 and the other year we didn't.
That's
So
correct.
we've lost 4%, and you never make that up unless you go from 9 to maybe 15%. So it's not a straight percentage increase that you can do. So we're still behind the recommendations of the firm originally.
Yes, and option C, if the direction to go with option C is to purchase the truck and add the personnel, you're still behind the 9% this year. Yep,
But it is progress.
absolutely.
The truck is, seems really kind of a key item for us to be able to maintain and open the drains that right now are probably half full or better in certain areas. And to be able to keep up with that maintenance and improve what we've got, essentially improve what we got. Because if you go over to any storm drain and you look at all the trash, all the sediment that washes down there, they clog up pretty dang quick.
Well, and that's what I was saying when Adam took us out there. He showed us exactly where the stuff gets caught. So, and it just goes, bubbles over.
Councilman Meisner?
Relative to the truck and item C, assuming that item C was presented to council and approved, I would like to see some kind of a quarterly report in terms of how many feet or miles of stormwater drainage we've cleaned
Absolutely.
to
Yep.
know that we're staying on top of that.
Adam, is that something that can be tracked in Cartograph?
Absolutely, yep. That's exactly how it would be done.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to see some kind of follow-up report with council in terms of what's actually happening there with those 2 staff that are supposedly going to be dedicated to stormwater.
You bet.
With respect to the timing, as City Administrator Stevens had mentioned, if we get the ordinance passed in February, we will have to have an RFP for that truck. We're anticipating that's going to take a couple weeks to get that drawn up. We'll have to have it open for probably a month, get it back to council for approval, and realistically, we're looking maybe, what, October timeframe, October, November timeframe before that truck would get in, depending on production, or if there was one that met our specs on, you know, on a lot.
Yeah, and fourth quarter would be great, because that would be the opportune time after your summer storms, that sort of stuff. You have winter time. Be a good time to start that work out.
After everything's plugged.
Right.
And so we wouldn't, you know, those reports, they would start showing up after you would get that truck and get the staffing.
Maybe the end.
Gives you lots of time to prepare them.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I'm assuming we wouldn't hire the employees until we're ready to put boots on the ground, is that right?
That is correct.
Correct.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments from council, or?
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, there are a couple other council members we haven't heard from. I'd love to hear which way they're leaning.
Sure.
Definitely, I think C is the easiest one to swallow. It's the most bang for our buck, and I think that putting Band-Aids on existing things don't always go the way that we want them to, so I'm in agreement on C.
And so let's just go around. Sometimes we do kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down on, or say what particular option we're doing. So let's just continue that, if you would, Mayor Smith.
See?
C.
See?
So I haven't gotten to say, I don't like to raise rates. I don't. But either we're going to complain about it or we're going to pay for it. So I say C.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions?
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, we'll prepare the documents and we'll bring that to council on the 21st.
Thank you. Then we're adjourned.